2, Justin Mckee, Centerbull. What's going on, man? What's the update? It's been a long time. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I've been good. I'll start off by saying I appreciate the first run. It seemed like we had a good interview, and that covered most of my history within the breed and how I got to where I'm at now. So I'm going to try to avoid falling back into some of those pitfalls unless something is pertinent to what we're talking about. But yeah, I mean, I think it's been a little over a year or so. Dog world is maybe starting to turn back around as far as monetarily and the market itself. But I would say that the state of my breed, the American Bulldog, has probably been at its, I don't know that it's been at its worst, but it's definitely getting down to a very thin core group of breeders that are trying to preserve some stuff. And then, you'll always have the flailing amateur type. I don't want to call them backyard breeder because we all breed in our backyard, but, maybe breeders without purpose, that come and go. But, breeding is always a fickle thing, and it's a lot harder than people think. So usually the time span of somebody new usually hits about 5 years. They get a couple dogs, and then they have a litter or two, and they seem to move them pretty easily. But then shortly thereafter, the calls will start coming from their customers about behavioral issues or even physical issues, health issues. So typically they realize pretty quickly they're inept and ill-equipped to kind of weather that storm and or be a good reference to their customer in how to handle whatever issues are coming up. But other than that, man, it's been pretty good. The breedings have been few and far between, I would say. I think I've had 2 breedings since maybe we were on last, and I've done a couple off-yard breedings for other breeders with a couple dogs of mine, so we've been trying to keep in touch. One is pretty recent, so we don't even know the dog's pregnant, and the other one, I think it ended up being a litter of 2 over a couple mishaps, but 2 females out of there, so I'm going to keep my eye on those and see how they mix. But yeah, I mean, still in the trenches, still picking up dog shit every day, and it's just part of the game, man. Trying to weather through the winter. I'm in Ohio, so we had that extreme cold snap come through, and that kind of rearranges the way that we do things. And fortunately, going into this winter, I actually had made improvements to any of my runs that didn't have the building attached to it, and bought some insulated dog boxes, and I've been loving those. Amish made insulated. They're about 2-inch thick with flap doors, and they have a hinge top that folds back that you can load up your straw and your shavings and all that stuff. But man, those things have been a game changer. The only thing I really don't love about them is that they're flat topped and the dogs can get on top of them. But fortunately, nobody's figured out to go over the top yet. So far, so good. But outside of that, it's just been same old routine, man. Just trying to build the best American Bulldogs that I can, and we've had some pretty good success to date, and I think I'm excited about the future. We'll probably get into some of those plans here in this conversation, but finally getting off yard, spent the last 4 or 5 years really breeding tight, and pushing that boundary and getting things cleaned up and making it more consistent, more accountable. So, the end goal for me has always been an accountable bloodline that's recognizable by sight, if not one bloodline, 2, which is pretty much how I focus my stuff. I have 2 general phenotypes, 2 general bloodlines. I do mix and match in between to try to get some of the characteristics and the behaviors of one line into another. But then during my selection process, I try to keep my phenotypes separate and accountable and consistent to each one of those lines. So that's kind of where I'm at mentally with everything. But heading off yard this year because just everything's related to everything, and I just need a couple more shots of something new to work around. Probably won't line breed on any of the new stuff, but I basically want to see the results before I try to make any kind of dedicated opinion about it. But more than likely, my thought process is to go and infuse with some new stuff and then come back and start going right back to the drawing board, breeding back to my own stuff. So
I gotcha.
yeah.
Okay, so two things. One is more of a quicker answer, I suppose, before we get into the other. So I believe we talked about this before, but you are breeding more of the hybrid. There's some Johnson stuff in there, but that athletic Scott stuff as well.
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah. So I guess maybe it's not as short of an answer as you think, but obviously we've talked about it. Everybody kind of refers to everything as the two standards of American Bulldogs. People refer to them as Johnson and Scott, which are really just bloodlines. In the trenches, it's bully and standard, or classic and standard. But I've always loved a good old fashioned American Bulldog, a bully dog. I've really never subscribed to a true standard dog. Just the physical appearance of the animals have just never struck me as a bulldog per se. But with that being said, I've always been right in the middle as far as I want high level athleticism and clean breathing. So with that being said, I have to eliminate a lot of stuff that maybe some other breeders anymore on the bully side are really pushing. I see a lot of guys, especially in the West Coast, really going for this kind of a more substance-based animal with a lot of bully-type features, which is great because it's 100% recognizable as a bulldog or a bully breed. The unfortunate truth is they're just not really capable of doing the things that I think the breed's meant to do. So with that being said, albeit I do love the aesthetics and the pleasing look of a bully dog, it has to be streamlined for me. So, I try to find that middle ground where you can recognizably see that it's an American Bulldog and a classic dog or a bully type dog, but with the ability to really get after it. Open airs, probably not going to carry as heavy a muscle, be a little more streamlined, a little more leg, and a lot more kind of just general wind and the ability to really get after it and run. There's, and I have some cobby dogs that move real cobby type, and
What do you mean by
I'll
that?
use them as a tool, but I won't line breed on them. Let's put it that way. And my selection process doesn't lend towards that.
What do you mean by that? Cobby?
Yeah, I guess it's probably a term that I have in my head that doesn't really make sense to the general public. But a cobby, so when I look at the way that a dog finds its power, in its running ability, I look for good rear drive that pushes the dog forward. When you get these dogs that are real blown out in the front end with real wide chests, you'll start to see that they kind of, when they run, they kind of move like a rocking horse. It's up, the front is moving up independently of the back, and they kind of move when they run. They kind of have a bounce or a bunny hop, and they move more of like a rocking horse. When I see a dog that has true running ability, their drive moves them straight forward. Their top line doesn't really go up and down as much as it just is a driving motion straight forward. So that's kind of where my goal is. If I see a dog that's real cobby and starts front end heavy and starts kind of doing that bouncy rocking horse motion, I can tell you right now that dog's not catching any rabbits for sure. So I'll use it as a tool to keep some substance in the program where I see fit, but it's not something that I would try to emulate over and over again. They do make cool couch dogs, and they have their place in this world. They're just not the place isn't in my program.
Sure. No, I know what you mean. One thing I did want to touch on, you mentioned muscle.
Yeah.
Some of the pictures that people have seen that even I've posted of your dogs. Holy shit.
Yeah.
You keep them definitely chiseled.
Yeah, and I'm known for it. I think a lot of that comes down off of Mufasa, who was a red-nosed male. I'm trying to think of what he would probably have been in the 2000 to 2010 range, if my memory serves me correctly. But yeah, I've been blessed with some really genetic freaky muscle, and those dogs, ironically, they are very high performing dogs. But if I were going to put them toe to toe with my other line, as far as like the ability to go long, maybe not hard and fast, but long, that they would probably fall short. But a lot of that, people ask me all the time, what am I doing with these dogs? What's the secret sauce? And it's all genetics. It really is. I mean, my dogs are in runs. They have access to a decent amount of space during the day, on their own time, short of any free time that they get with me. And they're just very highly active dogs, and they spend a lot of time, entertaining themselves with the other dogs in runs and jumping and running back and forth. And, I plow a ungodly amount of food through some of these animals to maintain weight on them, and inversely, it builds this insane muscle with a ton of striation, and when dogs have lats, it's legit. I mean, it's not. It's hard to get that level of muscle on a dog, without just some genetic help and a lot of food. I see people, they think there's somebody online, you post a dog like that, and they're like, oh, the dog looks hungry. I'm like, I'm telling you right now, that dog eats 5 times as much as any dog that sits in my house. You know what I mean? They just burn exponential more calories. And I think a lot of it comes down to fresh air, daylight, changing of the seasons, all of that I can't emulate with an indoor dog. It's just impossible. My indoor dogs do not carry the same level of muscle as a dog that goes out in a run. And, a lot of times we rotate dogs from out to in just to socialize and maintain training and crate training and all that stuff. But, the ones that have been permanent couch potatoes in this house will never have the same level of physicality as those other ones. It's just not possible.
It reminds me of that that comedian Bill Burr. Mm-hmm. He's like talking about he was talking about how his old lady rescued a pit bull and whatever. He's like, man, I think I'm starting to like this dog. Next thing you know, I'm asking him like, hey, how you getting these muscles right here? Like, what type of pressing are you doing for that right there? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I encourage anybody that really is looking for that in their program. They have to seek out, they have to seek out those genetics to get a good shot at it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And if you do that and you're honest with yourself and you see that a stud or a female is throwing that level of muscle in their offspring, then that's a good place to start, because I could take some of my other dogs here that are from my other bloodline. They just don't carry that addition. They all have thin skin, which shows the muscle that they do have, but they don't have that kind of muscle on muscle appearance, But those dogs are way more highly performing. I mean, it's kind of a catch-22. I mean, it's like the bodybuilder at the gym who's 270 pounds, yoked out of his mind, isn't probably as effective as the UFC fighter that's 185 pounds and just way more flexible and nimble, and all that goes with that. So I mean, that's the kind of the comparison.
100%.
But I don't know that it's that extreme in my dogs, but I mean, that's kind of the best analogy I can come up with.
No, that makes perfect sense. It's funny, my old martial arts trainer back in New York, excuse me, he took me to the mall once to go to Barnes & Noble's. It was funny. He wanted me to have this specific book, and we're walking through the mall to get to Barnes & Noble's, and we see this giant jack dude. He walks by us and kind of just gives us one of those shitty looks. And this is this little old man, and he's just like, but can he use it? And it was just like, okay.
True. It is very true. I mean, because, just kind of goes down to the fact that if you want to have big muscles like that, you're technically not doing a lot of cardio. You're not going for wind. You're not, you know what I mean? It's just a different mindset than a guy that wants to be a long distance runner. He's not going to go to the gym and put on a bunch of mass that he's got to go and carry around in the street when he's running. So, I mean, it's, you know, you kind of got to weigh what you're up against, and what the end goal is. Obviously, you know, having a dog in that physical condition typically doesn't hurt your program at all. I mean, you know, I mean, I've had a few pictures over the years go viral, and you know, and rightfully so. I'm proud of those dogs. I mean, not that I look for the attention, but the animals themselves speak for themselves, and I think it's representational of the program in general. So, you know, I'll always take it. Don't get me wrong. You know what I mean? And I think last it would have been 2 years ago now, not in 2024. I guess it would have been a 2023 breeding. I did Prophet to Annie, 2 heavily muscled dogs, and it just, the whole litter is shredded. I mean, absolutely shredded. I have one dog here. Her name's Lemon, and I have rights on 3 males. 2 of 3 I've seen more recently. One is local to me with a friend, and they all have that heavy muscle, and they all have a good bit of drive and seem to want to get after it. The only downside I saw on that litter was potentially it's kind of what we were talking about before we started the interview, was just some odd nerve stuff. Nothing that was like so bad that was going to cause any bites or anything like that, but just kind of just a general spook to weird objects or something new. Decent recovery times, you know, nothing absurd, but it was interesting because both dogs don't display either one of those behaviors. And, you know, it was a bigger litter of 11, but, you know, I raised them the same way I do everything else, and they were exposed to everything that I do with every other litter, and just happened to the way that the genes lined up, and every dog went to a different situation. So, you know, I can't say, oh, well, it was just this person. I mean, even the dog that I have here, she's, you know, she's a good dog. She does well here. Take her off property, which she doesn't have a ton of exposure to. She's okay. You know, I mean, she's not, you know, she's not pissing herself. She's okay. But, you know, and some of that is, I have to chalk it up to environmental, because I don't run my dogs everywhere and all the time. You know, I mean, I usually travel with a couple of them regularly. Depends on what I'm looking to do with them. But unfortunately, the timing or whatever was going on with life, she didn't get that same substantial off-property training. So, you know, I have to kind of weigh my options if I decide to move forward with breeding her, and how that would look. But I probably wouldn't line breed on anything that I would suspect would have been behind in a culprit. You know what I mean? Mm. Yeah. Now, but going back to, I guess I never did really answer your question as far as the hybrid, you know, mentality to the program. I don't know that I've ever set out to truly do hybrid dogs as an end goal, but what I've always tried to do is breed to the middle, and I find that you get a lot healthier dogs. You get dogs that are a little bit more do anywhere, do anything type of dog, because anymore, if you know, if you weathered the 2020 to 2024 market as a breeder at this point, the one thing you probably learned real quick was that you can't eliminate a portion of the public that could potentially want your breed of animal. You know, there's some people that have dedicated themselves to just doing working dogs with high drive and high energy. And unfortunately, you've only got, you know, at least in our community, you're probably down to 1% to 5% of the customer base is looking for something like that. Most people are looking for pets, and, you know, most people are looking not only for just a pet, they're just looking for eye candy. They don't even really concern themselves with any type of protection or innate defense drive. Then you have another segment that wants a really well well-bred, healthy dog that's looking for a little bit of protection, and I want to run with my dog, or I want to go out and play frisbee with the dog, and so I try to breed to the middle so I can capture as much of the audience that I can, and then it's for me as a person and a breeder, it's for me to take all the applications of people looking for a dog from me and weeding out the ones that I know are absolute no-goes because they're not built for it, or their personal situation, their dog count doesn't, jive with kind of my idealistic ways of where I want my animals, but you don't want to limit your net to a point where you can't catch any fish anymore. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I think it's a problem with all working breeds that people have to be cognizant of. What are you doing it for? I mean, if you're a hunter and you're breeding for the purpose to support your hobby or your livelihood, I totally get it. And you're going to have dogs that you got to find homes for that are probably not going to go to hunters, but you can't have them so focused that they can't live in a home, you know what I mean, on their task. You can't be breeding them to the point where they can't be in a house, can't be in a home, because at the end of the day, you're just going to end up having to hard call a bunch of stuff that you don't want, because you can't keep them all. So, yeah, I guess, I mean, ideally, if I had a picture perfect ideal dog for the program, it's a streamlined bully dog that really performs at a very high level. The unfortunate truth is people seem to always breed to the extreme, and then it kind of leaves you out on one side of the spectrum of the breed where everyone's like, well, your dog, everyone loves to use the word type. Your dog lacks type. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, because what do you mean by type? You know what I mean? Are you saying he doesn't have enough bully features? Does he not have enough substance? What are you truly trying to tell me? They hide behind the word type, like, oh, this puppy has a lot of type. What does that mean? I don't, I think people throw that around, and without really thinking about what they're trying to say, they don't articulate it well. And but again, just to go back, I guess it's a streamlined bully dog that functions at a very high level. And if I get something that looks a little more standard, I don't care. Sway is a perfect example. Next dog on the deck for being bred, and everything about her is a standard American Bulldog, down to bite, which is rare for me, and but she's an absolutely exceptional animal, and I would never kick her out of my program because she doesn't fit that bully picture perfectly. Now, what I know about her blood and what I know about the dogs behind her, being that she's 4 generations of my own stuff, I know what she's going to produce, and I know what's the probabilities with depending on who I put her to. So, it's just, you got to kind of have to look at it as a tool, and then just go through selective picking through your phenotypes and making sure that, okay, well, did I breed this dog to get bully dogs? Did I breed this dog to get more of her? And then that's kind of how I make my selections. I mean, case in point, I bred 2 dogs, Roxy to Pope. It was a 3-2 line breeding, I believe. And in that litter, there were 2 different females that I kept, and one fit one side of my stuff and the other one fit the other side of my stuff. So I kind of got the best of both worlds in that breeding. And I just said, fuck it, I'm just going to keep both dogs, you know what I mean? And let's just let them mature and see what they do. But, when I did the breeding, I stopped back and, about 5 or 6 weeks when I have the pups, I start looking, I said, I questioned myself, what did I do this breeding for? What did I hope to get out of this breeding? Well, really for me at that time, I wanted to get another dog that represented her mother, because her mother had produced so well. And I love that type of dog, which is a moderate bully American Bulldog with clean breathing, and that, okay, maybe she lacks a little head type or a little substance for the average American Bulldog enthusiast. But for me, I had to remind myself, well, this is why I did this breeding. And even if I saw another pup that was cool looking, I'm like, but that's not why I did the breeding. So then inversely, there was another pup that was equally as nice that fell a little bit more towards this standard stuff. And I was like, equally a nice a dog. And I'm like, well, at the end of the day, I got what I did want out of the breeding, and this is a bonus puppy. You know what I mean? And I was like, if this dog matures anything like her aunt, which is Sway, which is one of the muscled up dogs, it's a double dip. I won on both sides of the coin, so I don't have to worry about how it gets tossed. So I'll take my gambles here and there and keep pups, multiple pups. But I think the moral of the story is that really step back after you do a breeding and don't get enamored by a certain puppy. You have to ask yourself, why did I do this? And what am I looking for? And everybody's goals are different. Some people don't care about appearance, and some people don't care about any of that stuff. They might be secular to just working and work drives. And if they don't care what paint job the dog has, and a lot of band dog guys are just like that. They're not looking for a specific aesthetic. They're looking for a function, and that's a totally different mindset. Where, when I started breeding and I set out to do all this, my number one goal was a recognizable bloodline. Not recognizable by paper, recognizable by appearance. So if you were out at some dog show, or you're somewhere across the country and you're an American Bulldog enthusiast and you see that dog and you be like, I bet you got that dog from Justin. And they're going to be like, yes. And it takes work to get to that, because you got to be honest with yourself and consistent with yourself, and then if you're not that way, then it's going to be a hard game for you to reach that goal. Now there's other stuff that you can do, obviously, and not to say that you're not producing good dogs, but you have to just kind of understand what you're trying to do it for.
Right. Absolutely. Now, going back, before we were talking about the 2020s, a lot of breeders coming in. We jokingly refer to them as COVID breeders.
Yes.
A lot of them are falling away.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the unfortunate truth is, I don't really call it a wait list anymore, because nobody fucking waits. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
I call it a contact list. The people that contact me and say that, they're interested in getting a dog from me, whether, sometimes they're looking for a working dog, a show dog, or sometimes they're just looking for a pet. My contact list is bigger than it's ever been. And I, as much as my ego may want to say, because my program is so good, it's really just a matter of fact that there are few and far between people that are dedicating themselves to a purpose of bettering the breed. And within American Bulldog, I can't speak for other breeds, but I'm sure it's pretty much parallel throughout all breeds. I've had people call up and they're like, I can't find anybody that's doing working dogs anymore. And I'm not a working dog kennel. Now, can I produce a dog that has workability? Sure, but is it born and bred what I do? No. So, if I can't, usually what I'll do is if somebody calls me and says, hey, I'm looking for a working dog, the first thing I'm going to do is make some calls for them and try to find a dedicated working kennel to see if they have any plans, any openings for that person, because that's what I feel is the right thing to do. Sure. I want to get that person what they want. I don't need to sell them a dog just to sell them a dog. But in saying that, I've done this now maybe 2 or 3 times, and those people still have yet to find dogs. So they have just stayed with me and waiting on my next litter, which, fortunately for them, is going to be bred to a working dog. So they have a higher probability than maybe, say, a normal breeding from me to capture what they want out of the litter. But, there's just so few of us that are really dedicated anymore. And even some of the people that are still what I'll call active breeders haven't had the litters because they just don't have the market. So now I start to see that the people are waiting, and if they have a definite, standard for what they're looking for in their future pet or working dog, then they're more apt to hang on and just literally wait for that next breeding, because even myself, I went down to doing 1 litter a year, and that didn't put me in the green. 1 litter a year is probably recouping half of what I spend on the dogs annually. So I've got to get that second litter in. And maybe it's a little bit more than half. Maybe it covers my costs for the year on dog food, but it doesn't take into account any health testing or travel or showing or vet either regularly scheduled vet visits or unexpected vet visits. That second litter is everything that makes it worthwhile monetarily. Not that that's why I do this, but it definitely makes you feel a little better. And if you go 4 or 5 years of just basically covering your cost, and you've got all this time and effort involved, and it stipends moving a program forward if you can't get to that second litter a year. I don't know that I'd want to push any more than that, but if I can get 2 litters out a year, that way it gives me some time to put those puppies on the shelf, see what they do, the following year, kind of move forward with some different plans, and then kind of revisit once those couple litters get out and gone. I can kind of go back to that, the litters from the year before and see what really worked and what kind of turned out, and where did I have problems or did anything pop up in the meantime. But there's always going to be the startup and I don't want to call them fly by night. Usually the life cycle is about 5 years before it either becomes too much work, it ends your marriage. There's a huge pressure in my breed. I mean, these dogs aren't easy to keep in multiples. I mean, there's a lot of stress that goes on. We all understand dog fights and what comes with that. So I mean, it's a very high stressful type of lifestyle to begin with. And these people usually come in, they get all gung-ho, they load up on a bunch of dogs, they put out a couple litters, and they do sell, mostly to friends and family, and then they get stuck in no man's land, having to sell to strangers and trying to find a new appeal for why someone should buy from them versus somebody like myself or somebody else that's been in the breed for 20 plus years. And you're just always going to have that kind of underbelly churning over, and the unfortunate truth is the dogs that they produce really don't impact the breed. So it's, they're kind of what I'll call disposable pets. But the amount of people doing it the way that I'm doing it is down to literally maybe 2 handfuls. And that's what's getting a little bit discouraging, because when there's guys out there searching for stud dogs right now and can't find anything that meets their standard. I mean, that's a sad place to be. Or inversely, I've had guys, breeder friends of mine's looking for a new prospect male puppy, and can't find anything worth a shit, or they get one and it washes out immediately from this, that, or the other. So it's getting pretty discouraging. If I would have backed myself up 10 years, it was like, man, there was at least a list of 10 to 15 stud dogs that were pretty quality dogs that you at least had a good shot to try to get something moving forward. So yeah, it is getting a little discouraging, but fortunately for myself, I've had some good families, so I've got a lot of dogs that I have access to, which is nice. But again, they're all related to everything that I have, so I have to be cautious on how bottlenecked I truly get in the end.
Right. Earlier you mentioned something about larger litters versus smaller litters. Give me some of the key points. What are some of the key points you notice as far as pros and cons of larger litters versus smaller litters?
As far as the outcome, well, I can tell you this. I don't want large litters because they're just so goddamn cumbersome. 7's a nice number for me. I like that number. 7 makes it worthwhile. 11, 14, yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, and I would classify myself as a social person. I have a regular job that's part of my position that I do for a living is sales. So I'm used to talking to people and But when you've got 11 or 14 customers that you're trying to stay in touch with for a period of 8 weeks and answer questions and get them prepared and all that stuff, that is a very, very daunting task. And you better be mentally prepared for that, because, if you don't do your due diligence there, you're just going to end up having problems down the road that you're going to have to solve that you could have solved, on the front end of having the litter. But as far as outcomes of the dogs themselves, I think that's probably hard to dictate. If I guess maybe where you were going was like, have you seen nervy temps in a larger litter versus smaller? All those variables are very hard for me to control, because these are all going to other people's homes, and everybody raises their dogs different. The problems that most people have with their American Bulldogs aren't the problems that I have with mine, because I know better. You know what I mean? And I don't break the rules that I know shouldn't be broken, where most pet people will, and even some more experienced people will. But I don't know that I could see anything from a physical and or mental standpoint. I just personally don't love having that many dogs. I think it's harder to evaluate them that way. Obviously, you have twice as much work all the way around through the litter process. I mean, it may sound great to somebody like, oh, more puppies means more money. Well, yes, you are in fact true with that. But typically for myself, the bigger the litter, the lower the price, because I just want to move all the dogs at the same price point and make sure that everybody has the ability to get a quality animal, and that they're not having to dump so much money into the physical pet that they can't have any money left over for the care. So, I try to keep things reasonable to where people can get the proper tools, a sturdy crate, dedicated water and food bowls, and just the simple stuff. You don't need a lot to raise a dog. I think pet stores have you fooled thinking that you got to have all these toys, and literally almost everything at the pet store, within reason, probably 90% of it is all just a hazard to your animal. Realistically, absolutely. Those dogs, no dog needs anything that's being sold at a pet store. Absolutely. What they need is a tool to control them, whether that's a leash, a prong collar, an e-collar, a crate, a dedicated place of their own that you can get away from the animal, and the animal has a safe place for itself to maintain its safety. But all the toys and chew shit and all the treats and all that stuff, it's all just a bunch of processed choke hazards that are just going to end up in, especially with my breed, you'll end up in a blockage surgery at some point in your life. Mm-hmm. Going back to the original thing, I don't know that there's a lot that I can speak on as far as the size of the litter. Now, what I can tell you is, if you're talking about like how to encourage a larger litter, or and try to control that for yourself, a lot of that obviously, goes without being said, is just up to nature. But I think a lot of people, when they AI a dog, you're almost destined to have a smaller litter. I don't think a lot of people have a good grasp on timing of ovulation and when they should be doing those things, unless they're using a repro vet or they have the experience of progesterone testing. I think if you really want to give yourself the best level of success, you should always shoot to have a live tie and understand your dog's menstrual cycle. Usually what I do is I obviously have notes in my phone for every female that I have, when they come in, when they start to swell, when they come in. I try to monitor their secretions throughout the week or 2 weeks, and see that they run a normal schedule. They clear out, usually around day 10, 11, somewhere in there. And then, then they usually pick up 3 or 4 days later with a little bit more discharge, and then they kind of wean off their cycle. And as long as I see that, I know when this dog's going to ovulate, and I have a pretty good understanding of the timing of when I'm going to do my breedings. And I always encourage myself to do a live tie. You know what I mean? And if I do that, I know I'm going to get, I think I've only happened once where I didn't get a litter off a live tie, but every other time I've been pretty successful, and they've always been full litters. The only time I've really had small litters consistently is when I've had to AI because either a dog couldn't tie or there was something going on where we couldn't get the dogs together. I actually had one bitch that could never tie. She just wouldn't hold the male, and so I AI'd her both breedings, and she actually had full litters, but I had to progesterone test her because she had a naturally fast cycle. I mean, she would come in and come out in a week. So it wasn't my normal 2-week kind of stretch where I'm like, oh, okay, she's swelling. Oh, you can see a little bit of blood. Cool. We got time. With her, it was like, oh my God, she's swelling. We got to get her to the vet. We got to start testing her. And that was the only way I was ever going to get her bred successfully. And with the help of progesterone testing, obviously got full-size litters from her.
So a full-size litter to you would be 10, 12 pups?
No. American Bulldog, I think the average is about 7. On the standard side, the numbers get a little higher. So the standard dogs typically can get up into the 11, 12, 13. And I don't know why that is. It's probably just because they're have more terrier going way back, and maybe just some other breeds that were a little bit more conducive to having larger litters. But I think when you get on the bully side of things, you start to see that the numbers wane. Probably 6 to 7 would be your average litter, and then you're going to get the occasional. If you're breeding an older bitch, you might get the occasional 3 puppy litter or 5 or something along that line. Mm-hmm. I did a live type breeding for another breeder, and it was with Prophet, who's now 9 years old, and his bitch was 7. So this was kind of a throwback breeding because I've put this blood together in the past with another breeder. And this guy just happened to have a female. He was intending to breed her a while back ago, but life circumstances never let him happen. And he really wanted to get it done eventually. So he pulled the trigger at age 7, and we got her bred. And she ended up having 5 pups. He had a mishap, and I think he lost a few of them. But he still ended up with the 2. But yeah, my concern, I didn't take Prophet to have his semen evaluated or anything. So I was like, well, kind of hoping that he's still viable, and he was, and that she was, still able to throw some eggs and get it done, and he did. And he didn't get the numbers that he was looking for, but he got his next generation. He got to keep both females. One I think is in a co-own, and he kept one personally. And we'll sit back and watch them grow. And then I told him if they turn a corner and he's happy with what he sees, we'll just come back and line breed back to something I have, and then he can kind of be off and running with a full size litter and a younger bitch.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, shit, man. Where do we move from here?
I don't know.
Like,
as far as, I guess we can kind of touch on what the plans were. I had mentioned that I had been breeding tight for the last 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years. I started off doing a bunch of 3-2s, and then I kind of got real tight, did a mother-son. I did half-brother to half-sister with the other side of the pedigree, having this, I think it was a 3-3 on the other side and a 2-2 with the dog that I technically line bred on. And that litter was exceptional. They all came out extremely consistent. I think the litter was 7 males. It had no females, and almost all the dogs turned out to be within an earshot of each other, extremely similar, almost the exact same, to be honest with you. So then, honestly, with doing all that and having everything so tight, I think I've got 1, 2, 3. I got 3 Prophet daughters here. Still got 1 total outcross female that's retired, and then I've got the 2 Prophet granddaughters. So everything in my yard is related to Prophet in some way. So it was time to kind of jump off yard, and I had been hunting for a daily male that I could use, and unfortunately I just couldn't find anything clean enough so far. go in that direction. And with Jeff's stuff, I mean, he's very accountable with that bully side of stuff. Probably doesn't capture everything I would like in a bully dog, but just kind of using that kind of tool reference and getting some of that consistent type that Jeff has spent 20, probably 30 years breeding. His stuff is very recognizable at first glance.
You're talking Jeff, you're talking who?
Jeff Daly.
Jeff
Daly American
okay.
Bulldogs.
Gotcha.
Yeah, he's older now, so I don't know that he's very active. I haven't seen anything new out of him in quite some time, but there's some 5-year-old males from, the last known litters that I've seen that are out there. But with the new, I guess, not to get too off topic, but with Embark kind of being the new, I guess, standard for most people that are health testing, it seems like every time I use Embark now, every year, I get a new result of new things that they're calling breed specific, which is kind of added to the proverbial alphabet soup that we're all trying to navigate around. So with some of these new variables in place, I've had to be more cautious on who I'm breeding to what, and stuff that we never knew we have, you know what I mean, because no one was ever testing for it. So now I've got to kind of navigate those waters a little differently. So unfortunately I can't find that daily male, so I have always kind of loosely had made up my mind that I was always going to do something with Maggie down at Gunslinger, and the time is now. We tried to link up years ago on Pusher to India, and it was a weird circumstance of how things had played out, but that breeding didn't end up going down. And so now it's kind of circling and going to get it done. Actually, I have one dog that's in heat now that I was going to breed, but I'm holding out on Sway, hoping that she's going to come into heat. It kind of going 2 steps back to our conversation about physicality within the dogs and that level of shreddedness. The unfortunate truth for those that don't know, a dog that lean and that muscled up, they don't come into heat. So you've got to be very cautious if you have plans to breed a dog. It's just like a female bodybuilder. When they get their body percentage and their fat percentage is too low, they won't have their menstrual cycle. And I mean, her mother, for example, she never had a heat in her first 5 years of living. Mm-hmm. I thought there was actually something physically wrong with her, but she had sustained an injury on her. She had happy tail, and so we had brought her in the house, and we were kind of working through trying to get this tail to stop bleeding. If anybody's ever had happy tail, it is fucking the worst thing on planet Earth to have, because trying to keep a dog from wagging its tail and smacking its crate or its run or its kennel is damn near impossible. And so what we learned, though, in that incident is when we brought her in, well, she started putting on weight because she was being crated all the time. And as soon as she started getting a little bit of fat on her body, man, she instantly came into heat. And I was like, not missing this opportunity, and bred her. So that's, that created a handful of dogs that I have now, because I ended up breeding her 3 breedings back to back, because by the time, I think she was 5, maybe 4.5 or 5 at her first breeding. So I knew I was going to be limited, and I wanted to get stuff off of her because just the way that I had kept dogs for bloodlines, I didn't have any other options. So we put her through the paces of getting 3 litters out of her back to back, which she was a great mom, and it didn't affect her at all. And then she eventually went on to get spayed and was put in a pet home with a friend. And so in that, I learned that if these dogs get too low in body fat, they just never will come into heat. There's really nothing wrong with them. So long story short, we brought Sway in to put some heat on her, to encourage her to go into heat, because I want to get, as early. Typically my breeding window starts Thanksgiving weekend and after. So if a dog comes into heat in that window of opportunity, that's when I'll breed. So that way, when I get pups on the ground, usually by the time it's time for them to go home, it's like maybe late March, early April, and people can have some warm weather to get real training. Dogs not wanting to go outside because it's cold. It's a young puppy, and potty training's a lot easier when it's warm out. Plus, you get that first summer where you don't really have to worry about them running away or doing anything weird off leash, and you can really spend some time like honing in that relationship with them. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I've got kind of Sway sitting on the shelf, and we both sit around at night and say, does she look any bigger? Does she look any swollen? Does she look any like she's getting just constantly wiping her with a paper towel, hoping to see something. But as soon as she comes into heat, I'm going to take her down and breed her to Maggie's Bacchus. And Maggie's Bacchus is an absolute exceptional animal. I call him a hybrid dog. He doesn't really lean one way or the other too heavily. I can't remember if she shows him standard or bully, but just 100% American Bulldog, IGP2 title, plus all the other. I'm sure he has his OB and some other stuff. He might even have his 12-mile 80. I'm not sure, but obviously a dog that's pushing the boundaries of being able to compete in the working world as an American Bulldog, which is few and far between. So that's an exciting breeding for me. I mean, both dogs on paper, both dogs in picture, it's a super breeding. I mean, it is really, really a nice breeding, and Sway is just an exceptional animal. Anybody that can go on my website and sees or understands what I'm talking about, I'll let the dog do all the talking for herself. But so I'm really hyped up about that. The unfortunate truth, for those that are listening, that litter's probably sold 10 times over, short of anything that I keep. And then I'm going to go back down and revisit Maggie. She's got another dog named Gruffalo. Gruffalo comes down off of Ginger, who also produced another male in a different litter. His name is Frosty. And Frosty, I forget which year it was. It might have been 2022. He won everything. Dog's exceptional. Bully type American Bulldog, but really falls right into my kind of vision. Just a do anything American Bulldog. He must not have excelled in the working field, because I think she put him on the side. I think she's still using him for the program for a breeding tool, but as far as a dog to campaign and really try to go out and win some stuff, he wasn't the dog for her, which for her, fortunately for her, she's in a great position. She can number game, and if one doesn't turn out, she's got one right behind it to try out, and she's bringing up multiple dogs, and her husband trains dogs and she trains dogs, so they're at the super advantage to understanding the thresholds and limits of what they can do with each animal. So fortunately for me, dog's not going anywhere, and I can still use him. The unfortunate truth about Frosty is that he's an HUU carrier. The dog that I want to breed to is also an HUU carrier, which is all part of this new embark variables. So I'm going to use the other dog. Now, I guess my point is Gruffalo and Frosty, albeit from two different breedings, come down off Ginger, and they both really kind of carry her phenotype and look identical, not identical, but very, very similar to their mother. So, and that's kind of what I look for at this point in my breeding program, is that I want to see that a dog is consistently producing themselves in phenotype, because then I know it's accountable for what I can do with it. And so, albeit I'd maybe rather use Frosty. He's a little nicer than Gruffalo. Gruffalo holds his own, but, being that Ginger's behind both dogs and that both dogs have had a really exceptional show career, that's kind of the other breeding that I'm going to do now that I know that she's in standing heat right now and I'm passing on her. I know that probably won't happen until July, which is a little bit outside of my breeding window that I care for. But those are the only two dogs that I plan on breeding this year, and they're both going to go down to Maggie's and kind of partner up with her program. And then, fortunately, we'll be able to get those pups on the ground, and I'll probably keep a female and a male from each litter, and then just kind of put them on the shelf and let them be dogs and see where they go. And then once I kind of see how they turn out and what the entire litter kind of does for itself, then I'll make some decisions down the road what happens with them. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about that because it's, I think every breeding to me is really exciting. Some are a little what I'll call experimental, and some are more kind of focus driven on expectations and outcomes. I tried to do a breeding last summer with a bitch that I have here that, I kind of held on to her a little too long. Nothing wrong with the dog. Way, 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 way more bully than I ever truly keep. But, she's just a good old dog. And I have a really exceptional male that I produced with another partnering breeder that was a 2021 Dog of the Year, and he had a really good show season. I kind of just wanted to test the waters and see what he would throw, to be honest with you. And for whatever reason, it was a live tie, and she was more than ready, but it didn't take for whatever reason. So, I guess I would call that one a little bit more of an experimental breeding. I wasn't technically going to keep anything here on property off of it. I would probably have placed a male and a co-own, and if any other pet home would have kept, been willing to keep their dog intact, I would have just kind of seen what I got from it and kind of just use it as a little more of an exploratory breeding. It's not typically my intention to do breedings without really wanting to keep something, but sometimes you just got to throw some shit on the wall and see what sticks, and you got to do what it is. I mean, both dogs are health tested, both dogs were healthy, so it wasn't an issue of like, people were getting a poorer quality animal. They were just going to get a more experimental breeding from my standpoint than what I would normally do. Most of the stuff that I do, I can give the end user, the customer, a high probability of what they should see as far as temperament and, phenotype in the dog. Until I start dabbling with different blood, that's kind of where I start stepping back and say, you know what, I don't know what we're going to get from this. So we're going to have to see. We're all going to learn together. And that was kind of the case with the Annie Profit breeding. Annie's an inbred dog from another breeder. It was a half sister to half brother breeding that I did with Profit. So it was this female to Profit. And she's a very bully, extremely muscled up, just kind of that phenotype that I'm known for. But there was like one standard dog in her pedigree, which really had an influence on the entire litter, because there was definitely some more standard leaning dogs, including the one that I kept here, which was interesting, considering 99% of the pedigree was bully. There was still quite a few out of the 11. I'd say there was probably 4 that were a little bit more standard leaning, and then the other ones were kind of more typical towards my bully stuff. But the one thing that came out of that was that heavy muscle kind of carried through.
Now, for the listeners, describe, you said there's 2 dogs carrying HUU. What is HUU?
HUU, I don't know. I don't want to butcher what it basically it's I guess it's a disease that affects basically it produces kidney stones in dogs. So Dalmatians are known for it. I think it's called like I'm going to fuck it up if I try to say it. I'm sure everyone can look it up. But HUU wasn't something that was typical in our breed. For the most part, we were doing the cardiomyopathy, NCL, which is a neurological disease, and then ichthyosis, ick for short, which was a skin disorder. So if you're taking 2 carriers and breeding them together, you're going to get affected dogs. NCL is a terrible situation. I mean, if breeders aren't breeding for NCL and they have affected puppies, they're not going to know it until those dogs turn to 2 years old, and then it's basically like multiple sclerosis for dogs. So usually by 2, they start to lose their body functions, leg usage, balance, and then the dogs end up having to be put down. Ick is like a scaly skin disease. Now that can be present, like literally as the puppies are born and get cleaned up, you can start to see that puppies are affected. So, HUU, I remember, I'm not going to say who the person was, but there was a partnering breeder that I'm friendly with that had a litter that as the litter matured, they started getting calls back about urinary problems and some other issues related to the urinary tract. And back then, we didn't know any different. We didn't know that this was out there. But now, Embark, as they test more and more dogs, they're starting to show you more what they're calling breed-specific variants, I guess. More recently, I got one, and I have to look at what it is. It's some copper something, which again is now new because I've got to do my research to find out, okay, how impactful is this on a dog in general? Is it really something to be concerned about? Is it something that I just need to keep tabs on? There was another one that was more recently. Another one that they started showing you that it wasn't breed specific was mast cell tumor, MCT. So, they're giving you now with those Embark tests, they're giving you a probability of your dog getting mast cell tumors, which are usually those kind of fatty, lumpy stuff that shows up as the dogs get older. But there are some internal stuff that comes with that that can't be seen by the end user or the customer that can affect the dog down the line. And it actually happened to me just as we were all starting to learn about it. I had an older bitch out here that had a few lumps on her over the years, and she was 10, and I want to say it wasn't New Year's Eve of 2024. It was New Year's Eve of 2023. It was that weekend or so. I went out and, typical Bulldog, man, you feed them and they'll eat the bowl if you're not careful. So, I went out there to feed, and she wasn't even touching her food, and I was like, problem. So she comes in and watched her. I was taking her to work with me just to keep my eye on her, put her in a crate. And as the days went on, she was not being able to keep stuff down. I'm like, okay, this kind of lends me to a blockage, but she doesn't really have access to eat anything out in her run. So got her to the vet. I said, hey, man, you keep her for a couple days, run some bags through her, get her hydrated and all that. And he called me back after day 2. He's like, boss, I can't keep nothing down this dog. She's got to have something in her. I said, cut her open. So he did. And when he cut her open, he ended up finding that she had a rupture in her small intestine that couldn't be repaired. And so we ended up having to put her down, which sucked. But the whole point of the story is that MCT, mast cell tumor, part of the symptoms are thinning of the intestine walls. Well, as a dog matures, obviously, if it gets thinner and thinner, eventually something's going to rupture it, whether that just be kibble or a stick or a splinter or, any foreign object. And the unfortunate truth is she was in a position when he had her on the table. There was, and for me, I'm not going to sew her back up and bring her back out of it just for her to starve to death. It just didn't seem fair. So it was the right decision to do on behalf of the animal. But, other than that, she was in perfect health, and I was like, well, this is kind of shitty, you know what I mean? But now thinking through it, I was like, okay, well, clearly, and I had never had her embarked because it wasn't around when I was breeding her, but now I've done her offspring, and I see that it'll give you like, okay, your dog's got a 11 out of 1,000 chance of carrying significant symptoms to this disease. So, we, as a breeder, we do our best at the time that we can, with the information that we have at the time, I should say, to make educated decisions. But I really encourage people, at the very least, hips are something that are kind of more of a fringe topic, I think, amongst the kind of breeder peer group. But I definitely definitely encourage anybody that decides to put two dogs together to get embarks done and see what you're up against, because little do you know, you may have something that you don't know about. Because, if your dog's a carrier of NCL or IC, that's not the end of the world, because that dog's not affected. They have to have both copies of the genes, so it'd be two dogs with one copy that get bred together. Simple math tells you that 50% of the litter would be affected, 25% would be a carrier, and 25% would be clear. That's just a general parameter. I mean, I've done an NCL carrier to a non-carrier and only had one of 7 puppies be a carrier, and then I've done the same type of breeding and had all but one be a carrier. You know what I mean? So, right. Or all but one be a non-carrier. So the math isn't always, exact, but I encourage everybody to at least get that done, so you're not knowingly putting yourself with bad product out there and setting somebody else up for heartbreak, because that's all it's going to lead to, And Absolutely. The unfortunate truth, go back 20 years when we didn't have this kind of stuff. Maybe it's a little further than 20 years. Guys see ick come out, they would just hard call the puppies with ick, and they wouldn't, they would just move on. If they had 5 puppies left, that's what got sold, and it got moved on to maybe another breeder as a prospective pup, and they buy it, and then they got to deal with it until we got the access to this testing, and the pricing's got pretty reasonable. I mean, Embark does an okay job. I wish they had a breeders program, which I would encourage, if they could listen to this, that they would do. If they would allow us as breeders to have a little more heavily discounted rate, where I would be more encouraged to, test an entire litter before they left, would be awesome for me, especially when I knowingly am breeding a carrier to a non-carrier. I test my 4 or 5 prospects that I think I want to keep to see if their carriers are affected or anything. But that comes at an expense of $600 or $700. So it's not it would be nice to get it down a little bit more, and then inversely they would get more data and more feedback. So it's kind of a win-win for both people, but they haven't quite crossed that threshold for us yet.
No, I gotcha.
Yeah.
So I think we've talked about this before, and we'll probably end up wrapping up soon, but I had a couple more questions.
Yeah, you're good. I'm not in any hurry.
So what are you feeding as of now?
I'm feeding kibble. Everybody knows me as a longtime raw guy, and then when my numbers got up, and I went through a divorce as well. When the divorce happened, I was still feeding raw, but money got a little tighter. So I was like, okay, I gotta do what I got to do to survive for a little bit and let the dust settle, if you will. And I moved back over to kibble. And then the unfortunate truth is, because I didn't have the limitations of the marriage, my numbers went up with the dogs, because I got more serious with pushing harder. And the unfortunate truth was the situation with buying the raw. I have to buy it in 1 month increments. So, I'm at that point, with the amount of dogs that I have now, I'd be running 3 full-size freezers in order to do that. And I still host a co-op, and I still, helping with regards to other people feeding raw and some of my customers as well. And I always encourage everybody to do raw if they can afford it and have the time and the space to do so. I think it benefits the dog exponentially. It cuts down their water intake. They stay hydrated more. Obviously, we're eliminating all the processes of kibble. And I still supplement here and there with raw, more so on my pregnant or lactating bitches. A lot of tripe, just a lot of high fat, a lot of high value, especially beef or liver, stuff that has a lot of iron, to supplement them. But as far as what food I'm feeding right now, next level dog food is what I've moved to. After I went over from raw to kibble, I was on Victor, and then everybody lived through that big recall, and that reset a lot of people. I dabbled with Diamond, and I just hated it because it just didn't seem like it was getting digested well. The stools were very loose and very big, which made cleaning kennels exceptionally hard. So I'm tried Next Level, which was, I guess, the originators of Victor before they sold it. If I'm thinking through the storyline right, they sold it and had a non-compete for 3 years, and when that expired, they started back up and they created Next Level. You know, and that's what I feed. I feed their profession. The unfortunate truth, ironically enough, they formulate their bags and the colors of their bags exactly in line with the Victor line. So if you were feeding Victor Purple Bag Professional, guess what? Next Levels is a Purple Bag Professional. And if you were feeding their teal bag, it's their teal bag. Green, so it's all the same kind of dynamic. So if you're a Victor guy and you were considering making a change, I can't tell you that one's better than the other, but I can show you my dogs and tell you that it seems to be good. What I do love about it is the stools are fairly tight and compact. They seems like the bags are consistent, and I buy it direct from them on their website, kind of on a subscription model. I could, if my count is off a little bit and I need to press send a little sooner than what I had initially figured, it's literally here almost the next day. So that's a real benefit to me. And just the storage of kibble is, obviously much easier than running a bunch of freezers, and there's costs with running those freezers. Mm-hmm. And the handling's a lot easier. But so for the most part, I'm feeding the Next Level. I supplement with I think it's New Pro Gold is one of the supplements I use. I also use an organic salmon oil that I buy off of Amazon in a 1 gallon pump. So I usually give a good, when I'm feeding, I fill up a 5 gallon bucket of kibble, and I usually I'll fill it up halfway, give about 5 to 10 squirts of that salmon oil. I'll top it off with a scoop of the New, and then another round of kibble, another couple squirts, kind of like building popcorn at the movie theater. And then I just kind of run that through, and I'll kind of stop and start the New Pro as needed, but I usually run it a little bit more in the summer than I do in the winter. I don't know why. Don't ask me why there's any logic in it, but it's just kind of what I do. And then, as far as the volume is concerned, it's really just by the dog. For the most part, my house dogs, if you will, they probably don't get any more than 2 cups a day. And then my outdoor dogs that are in the runs are probably anywhere from 4 to 10 cups a day. And this time of year, usually the dogs that are in runs or outside doing a lot of work, I usually feed them. They're high energy or I forget what the turquoise bag is. More like a high fat one, and then the one I just use Professional as my baseline. So my baseline would always be Professional, which is their standard. And then if I know I have a very active group or a dog that needs more calories, I bump it up to their teal bag. And then obviously whatever other accoutrements I have. I get a bunch of, I'll buy 50-pound bags of mackerel, and in the summertime I'll throw out frozen mackerel to them. And then I still get, every now and again I'll have leftover raw from the pregnant bitch or the litter, and I'll just throw that out to the other dogs as well. They'll pretty much eat anything I give them. But I find really the only disadvantage to the kibble is just that constant necessity for water, which in the winter where I'm at in Ohio, man, frozen buckets are a real fucking problem. Yeah. And, bulldogs aren't everyone's like, why don't you get heated this and heated that? I said, you don't understand what a bulldog will do when they get bored, man. They'll eat a damn water bucket. I had a breeder friend that her dog ate a metal dog bowl and died. You know what I mean? So it's like, if they get froggy at some point and get bored, they just start eating anything. So I'm real cautious about wires or anything that they can get themselves into that could cause a problem. But yeah, the water situation in the winter is an absolute bear, dude. It sucks.
I hear that.
Yeah.
Well, hell, man, wow, what an interview.
Yeah, yeah.
Dude,
It's
this
the
was a good
dog
one.
world. It never seems to quit, but I'm hopeful that I'm hopeful that as the market kind of recoups, that maybe we can find some younger, more enthusiastic guys that want to kind of pick up the torch and carry on. And I haven't found too many of them yet. I've talked to a couple youngsters that are prospecting and keeping tabs on kennels to when they get themselves in a better position to start their own. I always take time to mentor these guys and answer any questions that they have, just because at the end of the day, I mean, I'm going to be 49 this year, and I feel like in the dog world, I'm getting up there, and I don't know how much more I have in me mentally to deal with it. But I love the animals and I love the dogs. I don't love the problems and the people. And if you're in this long enough, you're gonna have the problems and the people and the dogs that get surrendered that you got to go pick up and rehab and rehome and or try. You know what I mean? And then you have people that didn't do their due diligence with animals that end up having behavioral problems and all that stuff. It mentally beats me up and wears me out, because you got to understand the people that you're selling these dogs to they're not working dog people. They're not dog people. You know what I mean? They're a family that maybe raises 2 to 3 dogs in their entire lifetime, or I've raised 100 dogs at least, you know what I mean? And it's just, to me, there's a cycle, there's a pattern. It's just like anything. If you're doing it regularly, you know how to do stuff and what works and what doesn't. But these families don't, and they make mistakes, and they break rules that they shouldn't. And these dogs are, they're big, they're powerful, they have their own brains. If you let them do some thinking, it's probably not going to be the outcome that you choose for them to make the decision on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's tough because I'm a very active, and I answer my phone when people call, and I dread answering my phone when people call, because nobody ever calls you when it's great. They only call you when there's a problem. And the easy ones are my dog's limping, the dog's ears are full of shit, and that kind of stuff is simple. But when you get dogs that are resource guarding or acting out, making decisions, fighting the neighbor's dogs, just the whole plethora that comes with a gamey, work dog, that starts to wear on me, and it doesn't make it fun for me anymore. If I was only selling dogs to other Justins, it would be a lot easier. But that has its own set of circumstances with expectations on the other end, and it's hard because trying to build a dog for everybody, it's just not possible. Even doodles fucking suck, and they're a lot easier to deal with in some respects than these working dogs, but they're also fucking goofy, mindless idiots that, it's trying to like fucking train Jello. You just can't fucking do it. I don't, and some are innately smart, but regardless, they're just not that like cookie cutter lab that you can pretty much guarantee is just going to be like docile and easy, so it's tough, and I try not to discourage people to get into it because of that, but I think it's something that needs to be said so people understand that it's out there, and they can, understand what they're getting into, because it's not just, you produced a couple cute puppies. Well, at 2 years old, when that dog's trying to eat their other dog that they've had for 7 or 8 years, you got to set up the foundation that it's not going to happen, because once it does, it's probably not going to go back to normal. And then it puts the pet owner in a tough place, and inversely it puts you in a tough place, because a good breeder is going to probably want to take their dog back. But the one thing I will tell everybody, and I'm a victim to it too. I could sell 100 puppies tomorrow, but I couldn't give away 3 full-grown American Bulldogs. People just won't take adults, and even unless it's maybe a family friend that knows the dog personally, most people want to start fresh with a puppy, which, the unfortunate truth is they're probably better off taking the adult that's been trained by somebody like myself that has manners, boundaries, doesn't act out, doesn't have the resource guarding, has been put in its place, has a routine. You can pass that routine along, is totally crate trained. A dog that's willing to go in its crate every minute of the day, every time you ask of it. But people just get this stigma in their head that they don't want, less time with their animal, or they want to raise the dog itself to have this bonding thing. And the unfortunate truth is most people don't have the skill set to set the dog to be up, set them up for success. So they inherently create their own problems that they can't solve down the road. And then it puts us as a breeder in a bad spot, because, A, we only have so much space. B, I only have so much time. And, in the last 5 years, I've taken 3 dogs back and done my due diligence and retrained these dogs and set boundaries and, in the hopes that they could go on to live a long, happy life with somebody else. The unfortunate truth is the ability not to rehome these adults that are retired or have washed out of your program, short of hard culling them, you're stuck with them. And there's only so much space. My dog food bill it's a car note. You know what I mean? And
Right.
it's not a cheap car note either. It's a sizable car note. And, I would love to thin my numbers out. You know what I mean? I would love to just get down to real hard prospects, but the unfortunate truth is I'm not going to throw a dog wayward to the side just because I'm done with it. I want to find it a good, loving home and somebody that can appreciate the dog and have it easy. You know what I mean? Basically, have a dog you can bring in the home, show it around, show it its yard, and give it a crate and say, hey, man, let's get a cookie. That fucker's going to run right into that crate and sit there until you let him out again, and they're going to be happy about it, but people don't recognize that. They just think like, oh, that's a 5-year-old dog. I'm only going to have 5 or 6 years. But you're going to have an easy 5 or 6 years. You know what I mean? Like maybe more, maybe more. But I mean,
That's
it's
a good way
tough
to.
game.
That's a good way to look at it. That's a good way to look at it for sure.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the market has reset itself and everybody can get back to doing what they love. And my biggest concern within my breed, and I can only speak for that, is that the numbers are dwindling of what I'll call quality dogs. And that's a major concern. I can produce all the quality dogs I want, but the unfortunate truth is I can't always just continue to breed back to myself. And, that's why I have to introduce new blood. And when I have to do that, I want it to be the best that I can. And there's only so many people to go to at this point. So that's a little discouraging, to be honest with you. I don't know where it's going to be in another 5 years, but I'm hopeful that the few of us that have worked together can remain to do so, and everybody stays active and keep producing new animals and kind of keep this thing trudging forward. And hopefully eventually I'll find somebody I can hand this program off to and they can run with it and do their own thing with it. And, I don't know what that timeline is, but even if I stop tomorrow, I mean, I've probably got dogs till I'm 60, you know what I mean? So it's,
Right.
there's no short game in dogs, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's just
Absolutely.
the way that it is.
And just for the listeners, what is the name of your website and where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram with the dogs. Centerbulls is where you find us there. It's pretty basic. I keep up with almost every production I've ever produced. I show everything. I usually tell you who, in the comments, I'll tell you who the dog is bred out of and what their age is, so you can kind of gauge what the maturity level is and where the dog is in its development and who it came off of. So that's a good way to track kind of the general breedings. And then the website, which is pretty current and regularly up to date, as much as it needs to be, is centerbullkennel.com. Obviously, you can see the same Instagram feed there if you're not on there. Plus, you see all the dogs that I'm currently kind of hoping as breed stock if they haven't been used. There's a produced page that runs through every litter that I've had since I've started the website, and usually it has roughly their 8-week-old puppy picture, and then it has the adult pictures as people feed them back to me. And I try to keep that up to date so people can kind of, if you're a real dog man and you're really trying to hone in on what came from where and how it produces, that's the best tool you could ever have. the unfortunate truth, and maybe I'll throw something back out at the listeners they can throw in the comments. We've all, at least with my breed community, we've all lived on pedigree database for many years, and in the last year or so, it's kind of, I'm not sure what's going on, if it's overran with pop-ups or it's just lacking moderators or whatnot. We can't enter in any new dogs without contacting them directly. So people have kind of waned in using that, which is a great tool because it gives you a general kind of coefficiency of inbreeding, and it gives you a visual picture that you can follow along with different pedigrees. But if anybody knows another platform that people are regularly using that they find to be sufficient in doing the kind of the same format of giving coefficiencies and visual representations of the dogs in the past, I'd love to know it, because I know there's a lot of other people out there looking for the same thing. I've even toyed with maybe partnering up with a buddy who does coding and starting my own, and maybe doing it as maybe instead of doing the pop-up ads, maybe it's like a $5 registration for each animal or something, just to kind of support the website. But it's something that's out there that's desperately needed right now, since pedigree databases kind of fell off. Yeah, those are, as far as what I'm on. I mean, I'm on Facebook, but I honestly, it fucking drives me crazy, and I don't have a separate dog page. And I do post some stuff on my personal page, but it's the same stuff I put on Instagram, and the Instagram thing is public, and my obviously Facebook's a little different. I have some personal stuff on there, so I don't really entertain strangers on there as much, unless you're kind of have a big circle of friend of mine. But yep, that's how you get a hold of me. And if anybody ever wants to reach out direct, I mean, you can do it through my website, and there's phone number on there, there's email, there's contact page. I mean, and I'm very accessible. There's always a way to get a hold of me, and future breeding plans are on the website. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty, there's a lot of stuff on there too about health and vaccinations, and kind of my stance on some of that stuff. Raw feeding's on there. There's a good bit of stuff. That stuff I haven't updated too much more recently, but I think all the information still holds pretty true. So yeah, so I'm around. I mean, if anybody ever wants to get a hold of me, they can. And good luck. That's all I can say to the other guys.
I gotcha. Yeah, this has been hell of an interview. I love how you dive right in, and man, you just have so much to say, and I think we're definitely going to have to eventually do a part 3, because there's just so much we can conversate about. Yeah, I mean, I love talking dogs. I don't do it as much as I used to. I've talked to you. I mean, kind of I started a podcast last year. I kind of been trying to do it more seasonally, not like this endless flow. And I'm going to explain that why. But I started something more breed specific that basically is me talking to other American Bulldog breeders. Just kind of talks about health stuff. So that stuff's out there too. Drop the we need the name of the channel.
Oh, it's American Bulldog and Company, and that's on YouTube. So I'm sure if you search American Bulldog, and the reason I started it, to be honest with you, there really just isn't any great American Bulldog breed specific content out there. I mean, a lot of the shit that's out there is fucking fluff at best. Yeah. I mean, it is just like, oh, why should you get an American Bulldog? And they list some valid hit points, but I mean, at the end of the day, if you really want to get into the nuts and bolts, what makes the breed and the breeders, the show is basically me interviewing other breeders. And
I mean, on that topic though, like, I honestly think, like, it would be cool if more people out there that are breed specific would start channels for those breeds, instead of just, I mean, like you said, it's just so much fluff. It's so much like pros and cons of owning a Rottweiler.
Right.
And it's just like, oh my God, like, yeah. And it was funny. I only use that as an example because I've seen so many of those videos, and I had a Rottweiler for his whole life and retired him and sent him out to the country just to kind of be in a single dog home, be spoiled for his last years. And half of what they said in the pros and cons of owning a Rottweiler wasn't fucking true.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, if they could have more breed-specific channels. I'm more of the broad spectrum, and I'm okay with that. That's why I said, like, not only do I say go for it, but I think more people should do it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And the other thing that I see is that so I started it to kind of be more of a seasonal thing. I really only have the time to do it in the winter. You and I had discussed behind the scenes, my show's a little bit different format. There's some visual aspects that support the conversation real time, and that takes a shit ton of editing. Now, if I had a partner that could do the editing for me, I could get content, But the unfortunate truth is, and the other side of this coin that was very discouraging is that I could only get certain people to even come on. And even when I went back, kind of what I'll say back in time, took the time machine to go back to some of these kind of more, what I'll call, maybe the OG of breeders in this breed, people that kind of were a little bit, maybe not the foundation, but the next step after, once the breed kind of got a little more established, the people that really put their foot on the gas to bring it to where it is today, some of these guys, they don't want to talk about it because either there's bad blood out there, skeletons in their closet that they don't want to have come up, or they're just, some of these dog guys, they just don't want to talk about it. They just do it. And so the unfortunate truth is it's been hard to kind of keep going because I just don't have anybody that wants to do it with me. Aside from my own personal time of the editing, it's kind of discouraging because I'm trying to get some information, and I'm not pushing an agenda. I'm kind of, my focus has always been in the show I'm trying to showcase that breeder for their program. Now, if I go back into the time machine and try to get some guys that maybe aren't active breeding right now, but were very heavily active in the breed community, I'm not going to try to showcase their breeding program as much as just try to get a lay of the land for when they were active. You know what I mean? What was going on? Who were the big studs? Why did people do this? How come the shows were bigger? How come there was more health testing? I just want to digest some new information and get it out there so people can, understand from a first person point of view what it was like. What dogs did you interact with? Who can you attest for? Who can you vouch for as far as the animal's concerned? I know there's always been bad blood and bad business, and people have done that's in every business.
Of course.
Dogs. But I don't need to bring that up. It's not what I'm trying to do. But if anybody's out there and they're willing to do something, I'm going to try to get back into it here shortly. I've got a couple interviews. I regretfully say that I recorded about a year ago that I need to get edited and put out there just for the end user, the person that spent their time with me. I want to make sure that they get their time out there and showcase. And really, I'm just trying to showcase who's active in the breed so people have an understanding of who they are as a breeder, what's their focus, what's their goals, does that fit what you're looking for in a puppy? And so you can go and, and contact this person and get a dog from them if you want to. I don't care. You know what I mean? It's not a competition thing.
Honestly, I think one thing you should do, and this is just kind of like where I started, was when I did that Razor's Edge video, the Gotti video, the Remy line video. Where I started was basically that's what I knew. And I knew a little bit about game dogs. Now I'm more for the game dogs and the band dogs. But, I don't know. Maybe it's not a bad idea. Go back to, Dick the Bruiser. Go back to the Painter line and really just throw some videos together of just the baseline information about what they were and why, where they were, what part of the country, who owned them, things like that. I mean, it could be. Those are just the things that I think in between your podcast interviews, bro, those are the things that are kind of like those little hidden gems,
Yeah, and I've thought about it. The unfortunate truth is, once it gets to about April and this grass starts growing around here, buddy, I got time to do nothing. I go to work during the day. I come home, I'll slam a meal, and I'm out cutting grass and doing dogs till about 9:30, 10 o'clock. I'll sit down on the couch for 2 hours, and it starts its full repeat. And then on the weekends, I try to get all the chores done during the week so I can at least have some personal time on the weekends. The winter has really been my time, if you will, to do these kind of extracurricular projects. But then I usually try to get back into lifting and get my body back right from all the neglect over the summer. It's just, man, time. If they were 48-hour days, I'd be a lot better off. But I'm just running short on time. That's why if I had somebody that was willing to at least do the editing of the content, I could kind of knock them up and they could, or I could set them up and they could knock them down. That would be a whole lot easier. But I try to talk my daughter into it, but she's a damn teenager and she's doing her own thing. She's wheels up and she's now focused on getting into school and doing all that stuff. Yep. So she's not my go-to.
Yeah, no, my daughter's 16 now, and it used to be just last year when she was 15. Everything that Daddy said was religion. And now, now I don't know shit, and my opinions are outdated.
You're weathering the big storm, buddy. I mean, 13 to 18 that's when parenting becomes really real.
For me, it was a fucking flip of a switch, man. 15 to 16. 100%. 15 to 16. She was 15. She was my little angel all the way up since she was a little baby, all the way up. 16 came, now she's questioning everything. I'm just like, shit, what happened?
They get wheels up, man, and it changes their brains.
Yeah, I don't know. What are we going to do?
Well, I appreciate your time. Hopefully there's some value in this, and I encourage everybody to check me out, and if they have any questions, they're more than welcome to reach out. And kudos to you, man. Honestly, I can tell you from, I don't know how long ago, probably a little over a year or so ago since we did the first episode, I've had numerous people tell me that they've either heard me on your podcast or subsequently you inspired me to do my own, and they kind of learned me through that. I'm a very transparent person, so I think it comes through in any of the content that I do. If somebody's got a question, they need an answer, they just want steered in the right direction, I've got no problem taking time out of my day to make that happen for somebody. And if I can't facilitate what they're looking for, I usually can point them in the right direction, and hopefully it gets them what they want.
Well, yeah, man, absolutely. And I'm so glad, I was able to be of some help, man, because I like what you're doing. The dogs you have are magnificent. I've always loved, you have almost that, and don't get me wrong when I say this, you have purebred and you have hybrid, you have, you almost do the band dog thing of the American Bulldog world, if I call it, because you have that big cheeky head and the chest and the chisel and all that, but your dogs can still move. So I don't know what your dogs are as far as the American Bulldog is concerned. I really stand behind. I love your American Bulldogs, and that I'm not being biased. Your American Bulldogs are second to none as far as what I would look for if I was looking for an American Bulldog. These are badass dogs, man.
Well, I appreciate that because there's a lot of love, sweat, tears, and blood that goes into it. That's for sure.
But I mean, you captured that happy medium.
I've always. Not that again?
No, not to cut you off. I said you captured that happy medium. I mean, we all want that fat head. We all want that big chest. We all want that intimidating looking dog. But like you said earlier in the interview, so many people go too far towards that, and then the dog can't move. Now, even though the dog might still make a great home protection dog, that dog's going to get winded after a little while. I mean, there's a fine line between an intimidation dog and a performance dog, and I think you've locked that in pretty well.
Yeah, the scary thing is going back 20 years when I kind of figured out what I really loved and wanted to do with them, people looked at me like I was crazy because I didn't follow what everybody else was doing at the time. And, here we are 20 years later in full circle, and I can start to see that my peer group has also started to move in a similar direction. It only takes honestly, man, unfortunately for me, it hasn't happened, but I know it's happened multitude of times with other breeders, especially on the bully side. It only takes one or two times before you come home from your job and you're in your yard and a dog is heat stroked out, or you get that call from the family that says, oh, the dog was out, playing ball in the backyard and started to, choke on its own spit and died because it heat stroked. It only takes a couple of those phone calls before you realize, well, maybe I'm not doing this right. You know what I mean? Because it's causing other people heartache and pain, and then it's also inversely going to cause you some strife, and if you have a heart, you know what I mean?
And especially when you go back and look at just at the bare bones, description of, oh, I have a dog. Now, if you look at any of the old 80s movies, 90 movies, I mean, See Spot Run, Beethoven, any of these, you have a dog. That means he likes to play outside, he likes to do this, he likes to do that. But the dog shouldn't just die just from being a dog.
Yeah, the
dog shouldn't just die from being a dog. If I'm out there in 90 degrees, we're playing outside for a little bit, me as a human, even as a child, I'd be like, all right, it's hot out here, I want to go in the house. The dog should last longer than me before we go in the house.
1,000,000%. Literally, like I see other people that will showcase a dog, and they're, head type, bone, look at this, look at that. And the first thing I see is these pinched nares, a dry nose, which tells me that the dog is just, its airways are just insufficient.
Oh, just sucking back.
Pinched nares, it's no bueno, buddy. I mean, you know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
The dog's got to be able to breathe, and that's not even getting into talking about soft palates or anything else. I mean, you have literally restricted its one way of breathing right off the rip. And I can always tell if I see a dog in a picture with a curled tongue, I know it rattles. I mean, you see a lot of guys putting, hype music over their videos, and I get some guys aren't doing it purposely, but there's a lot of guys that are doing that purposely. So you can't hear the dog sitting there going,
yeah.
I mean, that's just not healthy. And the unfortunate
Baby
truth,
D.
whether they realize it or not, even if the dog never heat stroked out, that lack of oxygen intake will shorten the dog's life exponentially over time.
Yeah,
so
it's like a full-grown male.
8-9 years.
It's like a full-grown man snoring his whole life.
Yes, yeah, it's a struggle. It's not a healthy thing, and the unfortunate truth is just like everything. I mean, if you're a car guy, whatever your genre of cars, if you're a go fast car guy, you just always want it to go faster, and if you're a more of a low rider type guy, it's about more bling. Everybody always wants to go to the extreme. Nobody just wants to find that middle ground of like performance, handling, and looks. They don't, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I can get a low rider with hydraulics that I can't drive over 50 miles an hour, and then inversely, I can get a Formula One race car that I can't take on the street because it doesn't have a suspension that'll, you got to have something that feeds what the market is today. And today, the market is a dog that typically lives in a residential setting with family members and neighbors, and whether it's a physical attribute that keeps them from being able to live long and being successful, or a mental attribute. I mean, you've got to keep pushing the boundaries to making it work for that first, because that's 90% of your clientele, and then everything after that is something else. And I always caution everybody, you get out into the extremes, bud, you're going to find yourself in a bad way at some point. It's just going to catch up with you eventually.
Absolutely. And to end the conversation, I want to make one final point, which I always make. Me being a survivalist and battlebred canines turning into battlebred concepts, which we will be covering more of this later on. When the electricity goes out, the AC goes out with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for all the listeners, collect bullets and dogs. That's all you need.
That's it. That's it, man. Hey, it's been a pleasure.
Shoot them, they'll eat them.
It's been a pleasure to have you, my friend.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Hey, next time we'll get back into it.
All right, my friend. We'll talk soon.